All right, welcome to our Technology Showcase series. Today we're going to be talking about the attack simulation solution called SafeBreach. I'm Kathy Waschenberger. I'm the CIO of FocusPoint Technologies, and I'm here with Chris Weber, the Senior Security Strategist of SafeBreach. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
Great. So SafeBreach is one of our premier partners specializing in cybersecurity attack simulations. And today we're going to introduce everyone to the technology. We're going to talk about some of the business problems solved, an overview of the solution, some of those key differentiators and what makes SafeBreach special. Talk a little bit through some of the integration processes, and then we might even have some time for some fun facts about SafeBreach and the company itself.
Sounds good to me.
So with that, Chris, if you think about the current events in the world today, how we're dealing with cybersecurity, how do you feel that SafeBreach can help out with that?
So much focus in the last, let's say 5 years on cybersecurity because the threats just keep increasing. I think what's really happened is everyone is aware of it. We're all doing everything we can. We all have the best intentions to try to stop attackers. But we're getting to the point now where the complexity has really grown. There's a lot of different tools, a lot of techniques, a lot of teams and things that we do on those teams in order to stop the bad guys from getting in, from finding our stuff, and from getting it out. And the complexity is starting to be its own problem. It's starting to really mask some issues that we might have. Maybe configuration isn't staying up to date, or policies changing, or 2 different or 3 different or 12 different security controls are not working together the way they should, and they're introducing risk. And I think that overwhelming nature of security is starting to catch up to us. Mm-hmm. And I think we need a way to make sure that everything we've invested in, everything we've deployed, whether it's 2 products or 100 products, that they're doing what they're supposed to do. We need to validate that the security is working the way it should.
That's absolutely great. Can you tell me some of the business problems that you would see that are actually solved by SafeBreach?
Absolutely. So we see oftentimes that companies have deployed a given technology, have the sense that things are working the way they should, but attackers are able to find their way through these small gaps, the blind spots that we can't see, or the unexpected problems that we've built into our environment. SafeBreach actually helps to think and work just like attackers do, to execute attacks against all of our defenses in real time, in production, continuously all the time, to see, hey, what's getting stopped and what makes its way through. And in that way, you don't have to wait for an attacker to actually show where your defenses are weak. You can see them right up front. You can also see where they're strong and know where to prioritize. Hey, I need to fix this config, or we have a gap over here we need a tool or a technique to fix, or we need to get more response from your security team.
That sounds almost too good to be true. I mean, that's one of the things I really like about SafeBreach is it seems to be something a little bit new and a little bit different that works with your current infrastructure and your current tool sets and your current controls that you already have in place. Can you tell me a little bit about how that product actually works in an environment?
What it basically does is it executes attacks the same way an attacker would do it, but it does it in a safe way. Let's say we had an environment that had like a business space where all of our employees worked, and then it had a private customer data database. Those should be separated and segregated, and we've got internal segmentation to protect those against each other so employees can accidentally get into the data that they shouldn't, so that customer data is protected, and they're all surrounded by some kind of perimeter security to keep the bad guys out and to keep the good data in. Well, in that environment, we'd need to make sure that all that's working, so we'd put a simulator in the employee environment, a simulator in the customer data environment, and a third simulator out maybe in a private cloud environment. And in that way, our simulators will try to talk to each other to see what can happen between them. And they talk in only the language that attackers use. They talk in attack techniques. So we'll try to infiltrate from the outside in. Can I get to the employee area? Can I get to the customer data area from the outside? We'll try to move laterally between them by using techniques attackers really use, by using lateral movement techniques, by using different types of proven and emerging techniques. And then we'll also try to see if we can simulate data and exfiltrate that through the perimeter defenses. Now, at all times, it sounds like, wow, we're running real attacks that might put real risk in place. But because SafeBreach is designed for production deployment and to be safe, it uses the real technique, but it uses simulated data. So for example, in an exfiltration attack, we're never going to steal a real credit card number or a real social security number. We can simulate that data and then see if it can be sent out. Can it go directly over HTTP, for example? Can it be packed very small into the headers of different kinds of traffic, maybe NTP traffic, maybe DNS traffic? And if so, can I trickle it out that way and sneak it past security defenses? The same exact things attackers do, we're trying to do with simulated data in a safe way that's never going to put your production at risk.
That's awesome. Chris, how do you actually do that? Are there agents that have to be put on endpoints or anything like that? How do you do that without actually impacting the architecture itself?
Depending on the type of deployment and the type of security that you want to validate, there's different topologies that every customer might use, but it breaks down very simply in as much as if you want to test endpoint security controls, yeah, there's basically an agent that we'd put on a clone of an endpoint system that we can run in production. That's going to test whether or not malware can be downloaded to disk. It's going to test whether or not local techniques like remote access tools or Trojans or anything that's going to modify or attempt to modify the files on that machine, like ransomware. We can actually execute that safely. We're never going to lock all the files on a given machine, but we can spin up and create some files that are just regular files that aren't in any sort of risk, and we can see if those are locked. If we can encrypt those, if we can lock those like ransomware, and an endpoint detection tool doesn't notice, well, that should raise a red flag. We'll show those results. If we can't, that's even better news. That means that endpoint control is working, and in that case, that result is shown, the positive result.
So from a SafeBreach, a company perspective, what do you think sets yourselves and in SafeBreach apart from other vendors that might provide the same type of capability?
That's a great question, actually. The market is quickly moving. There are players in the market. We see folks like Gartner and others really sort of assigning a lot of value to this space. And what we see as a real differentiator when our customers tell us makes the difference on why they choose SafeBreach are a few things that can be kind of called in three different buckets. The continuous nature of what we do is a big one. So the fact that SafeBreach simulations are always running, that allows you to not have to spend a lot of time building different kinds of attacks, not architecting only specific things that you want to look for. Hey, I only want to test my endpoint today, so I'm going to have to go and think about what endpoint security testing looks like. SafeBreach does it all automatically and continuously, and it's always happening, which means you don't have to dedicate people to it. It's running all the time, and it means that changes from day to day are very quickly found. It's not like you're running a test once a year where you have a 365-day exposure window if something's wrong. This is hour by hour if you want it to be, and in that way you minimize that exposure time, and you don't have to dedicate human brains to figuring out the attack techniques that might be used. So that continuous nature is key. And the last one is the comprehensive nature of what we call our hacker's playbook, the techniques that we actually use. As of our interview here today, we have over 3,600 different attack techniques in our hacker's playbook that are running automatically and continuously across our customer environments. It's a really deep set of attacks. It's everything that you'd expect as far as proven attacks go, like I mentioned, things as simple and as proven as DNS tunneling, through to emerging attacks and new attacks that are just on the cusp of making their way out. We have a security research team dedicated to us that are constantly coming up with new ways to infiltrate, move laterally, and exfiltrate data, enhance their controls to protect them. So again, the comprehensive nature, the continuous nature, the automated nature, it means less people dedicated to testing your security. It means uncovering blind spots and eliminating bias that your testing team might have, and it means you get a really good set of what could happen because you have a real comprehensive set of attacks without having to figure it all out on your own.
So one of the things that I'm often challenged with, and I've seen this in other environments that I've also worked in, is the whole integration and ongoing support process. Technology seems to work. It's how does it work with the rest of your processes? How do you actually get it put into the environment, supported, and then long-term be able to use it on a regular basis, like you mentioned? Can you talk a little bit about the integration and support process?
That it has to deploy quickly and easily. And by making our simulator super lightweight, controlled by a console that can either run on-prem or in the cloud or in private cloud, something that's really flexible and easy to deploy, we can actually get things off the ground inside of an hour and start getting findings just that quickly, right? So that instantaneous almost nature of getting things running, that is key for first getting off the ground. And then the integrations with things like your SIM or things like your ticketing or orchestration tools, that's critical for the remediation and the visibility, of course, right? It can't just be standalone, it has to work with your environment. So we worked hard to make sure that we could feed information up to a SIM, pull information back and see what alerts are firing and make sure that's working. We developed deep integrations with things like Jira and ServiceNow so that operations teams can get the right information from the system and say, okay, here's the prioritized thing I need to fix. I need to go out to the firewalls and make a change, or I need to go out to a proxy and make a change. Here's what can happen there. And then in the case of customers that are using automation like Demisto, for example, or Phantom, we've got those integrations too to actually have essentially closed loop security. Since we're continuously looking for new issues, if we find one, we can send it to an orchestration platform or an automation platform, get that closed, and then immediately retest and validate that the fix worked the way it should.
Those are really good examples, and it makes me feel a whole lot better that the process isn't terrible to go through to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that, can you talk a little bit about a customer success story? Give me an example of what's worked that you've seen in the industry with some of your customers.
The first one that comes to mind is a very large healthcare organization who, in initial deployment, actually it was in like a POC. They took and just deployed a few different simulators in their environment within about 40 minutes, and we're getting some results that came back very quickly, and saw they were doing a pretty good job across the entire kill chain, stopping infiltration, stopping lateral movement, stopping exfiltration. And they realized they were doing a better job on the infill than on lateral movement or exfiltration. And so they made a quick decision right then and there. They said, all right, we're going to, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to focus a little bit on our segmentation, and we're going to focus a little bit on our exfiltration policies. And without buying a new piece of hardware, without dedicating any more than a week's worth of time to prioritize a few results and make some configuration changes, they were able to improve their security about 20%. What I mean by that is 20% of the overall attacks that were making their way through at the end of those 2 weeks were now blocked without investing in any new tools, without investing in any new technology, just by simply getting the most out of what they had already in place. And that was just at the end of the POC. They went into deployment, and they're now continuously tuning and tweaking. They've been able to get a whole lot more security out of their existing tools. And what's even more interesting about that to me is that it's saved them. They were thinking about doing a very expensive refresh of some of the hardware that was in place protecting them, multiple millions of dollars in this case. And they actually ended up being able to spend that investment not on the tools, because the tools were fine. They actually were able to spend that on increasing their team size, both from an operations sort of blue team side and from a general security perspective where they're kind of more purple teamy. And that's really helped pay dividends to grow their security and optimization, which I think is really pretty cool. It's not automation taking the place of human beings. It's automation meaning taking the place of some of the additional technology that's not necessary and allowing for smart humans to come in and get the most out of what they had. Right,
and they're able to do that on an ongoing basis rather just, than the one and done type of thing if you're doing some sort of a quick assessment like you mentioned. That's
exactly
great.
It fed the team, and the team was able to keep working continuously and make sure that they were always staying on top of new and emerging attacks and changes to their environment.
Right, perfect. So we've talked a lot about the good and the positives and the, how it all works. So there's always something to watch out for when purchasing technology or looking at a different type of technology, certainly something new like what we've been talking about. What would you say people should consider before or during their POC with SafeBreach? Right.
I think that it's critical to do a few things before you do an evaluation of really any breach and attack simulation solution. One, have a clear idea in mind of what it is that you're expecting and how you're going to act on any new findings. Sometimes we see customers that get the data and they're really excited, but they don't necessarily have a process by which they can say, all right, we found out that we need to optimize our policy on our DLP, but how are we going to get that actually productionalized? So be ready for your operations team to say, all right, there's a new channel. We're going to use Jira. We're committed to that. We're going to have tickets that are available, and we're going to close these in X period of time. That's one thing to think about. It's usually already existing, and it's not too much of a heavy lift to get that figured out. I think it's also critical to evaluate with an eye towards how much effort is this going to take to actually create and run these attacks. And if the answer to that is it's going to take a lot of effort to run those, then it's probably not the right solution, or it's certainly not deployed the right way. The attacks shouldn't require a smart, talented red teamer to actually go in and build and say, all right, an attacker would go from place A to B by using this kind of infiltration technique. They're going to use X malware, which is a dropper, and then when we're on B, they're going to download these 3 other pieces of malware, which are going to try to execute command and control traffic between this and that, and they're, on, and all of a sudden we've built a 17-stage attack campaign, which might be really elegant and cool, and it might reflect what one attacker might do. But how much time did it take to actually manually build that, and how accurate is it, and what else is going to happen outside of that? If you're spending a lot of time, or you feel like you have to spend a lot of time manually creating things, then you're probably not on the right track, because a red teamer can already do some of that work. The automation is what's powerful here, and it should be automatic to just try everything. Figure out how to pivot, adapt, just like real attackers do. So if you see something that takes a long time or a lot of manual configuration up front, it may not be the right augmentation. Better instead to have something that's fully automatic, so your operations team can be ready to receive those findings and actually act on them for fast remediation without having to spend a ton of time figuring out what would an attacker do in my environment. The tool, the platform, should be able to figure out what the attacker is going to do and execute that with no manual overhead.
I think that this is really an exciting technology, and it's one that can also be used in all different types of environments. So whether you're a large organization that has a very mature security program, or even a smaller organization that might just be starting out and just starting to mature their program, this is something that could be useful. Chris, it has been a pleasure talking with you today and hearing about SafeBreach. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to make sure everyone understands about the tool?
Well, thanks. It's been a pleasure on my side too. I think as far as final thoughts go, it's just sort of a rallying cry from my perspective. As all of us, we've been in the security game a lot of years at this point. I've seen lots of trends come and go, but what isn't changing is the fact that attackers these days seem to have the upper hand because they're relentless, they do not let up, and they're constantly trying to find even a 6-hour window that they can get in and get through things. I think at this point, it's not about buying new tools. You likely have everything you need to stop unless you're a brand new company, in which case you likely have good experience that tells you what the right tools will be. Now it's about making sure that the tools that you have, the products that you have, the techniques you use, and the teams you've built are actually effective at stopping attacks that are relentless and continuous and running in your environment without being done by the bad guys. You can do it yourself with the same techniques that they have to get ahead of these new bad guy attacks.
Thank you, Chris, for your time. This has been another great example of technology that can meet business problems related to cybersecurity. So download the latest edition of SafeBreach's Hacker's Playbook. This is an informative resource from an attacker's point of view. Links will be on the website as well as below the video on FocusPoint's YouTube channel. Check back often for more Premier Partner Showcases. My name's Kathy Waschenberger. I'm the CIO of FocusPoint. Thank you very much for your time.